There we go. We are recording this webinar and we'll make the webinar and the PowerPoint presentation and all other relevant information available on our website when we're finished. Any questions and answers, post them as you think of them. They'll be answered as each speaker ends their presentation. Your speakers this evening are Wendy Anderson, who is our property and insurance manager for the church, and she's been with the church for over 6 years now. Her background is in insurance and investigations. Thank you, Wendy. And my name is Trudy. I'm the Health and Safety and Risk Advisor for the church, and I've been in this role since 2017, end of 2017. My background is in construction and also in the government compliance sector. So excuse me, I will be clearing my throat as the evening progresses. So Wendy, would you like to start us off, please?
Well, I'll just point out that you can use the quick QA button at the bottom of the screen. Welcome everybody here this evening. It's good to see you. But the QA option at the bottom of your screen, post your questions as you think of them, and they'll be answered as each speaker finishes, or time prevailing. Employment claims. I want to talk to you about the employment claim process, and hopefully you'll have clarification on the process when I'm finished, and also the reasoning behind it and why we do it. So examples of claims are employee lodges a personal grievance. Where you think, if you're in a position with an employee that you manage, and you think there's a chance of a personal grievance, you can give me a call or you can send me an email and give me the heads up, even though the personal grievance hasn't been lodged. I will most likely ask you if you have sought legal advice at this point, and we will discuss that. Employment claims can be because there's been a dispute and it hasn't been resolved effectively, and or the employee doesn't like the outcome due to the employer's action or inaction, and sometimes inaction can actually be worse than action. The employee may not feel supported or even believed, and especially that they haven't been treated fairly. They didn't get a fair treatment, and this could even be the result of mismanagement or perhaps bullying in the workplace. Restructure is another area that can cause a lot of grief and cause someone that may miss out on a position where you may have 3 jobs becoming 2 jobs and one person misses out. They're given a redundancy, but they're not happy about it because they feel forced to have to take that. There may be an employee investigation that's goes along the disciplinary road, and the employee agrees to leave, but they're not happy to do that. They go home, have a good think about it, and decide, no, actually, I'm going to lodge a personal grievance, because sometimes people will just do it just to see how far they can get, or their chances of re-employment are not that great. Constructive dismissal is something that is often a reason for a personal grievance to be lodged, and that is where the employee feels that they have been forced to resign. That could be the employer has created a hostile work environment or allowed a hostile work environment, and it may be a colleague that's hostile. And because the resignation is not truly voluntary, it is in effect a termination. Other names for a constructive discharge, a dismissal could be a constructive discharge or a constructive termination. Thanks, Trudy. What can trigger an employment claim? Generally, the changes in employment circumstances, or that someone is not happy with the work conditions, and they may have raised their concerns and it hasn't, nothing has been addressed. So those unaddressed work conditions, a claim can be triggered from the change in circumstances may not have been handled correctly or efficiently, or suitably for the employees, and that could be an organisational restructure, potential redundancies, the disciplinary process of an employee or employees. It may be employment termination, where someone is sacked basically or fired, termination of their employment, the cancellation of funding for staffing in a unit, or even a whole workplace, and again, an employee feeling they're forced to resign. Unaddressed work conditions can trigger an employment claim, and they can include physical aspects like abuse or assault, and mental and psychological, such as bullying, and maybe managerial pressure, biological hazards. And if they remain unaddressed, this could lead to criminal investigation and or prosecution. It's very important at the onset of any changes in employment circumstances that legal advice for even minor changes is sought at the very start, because what might cost you $2,000-3,000 could save you a lot more if there's a personal grievance, and a reasonable size settlement comes from that. We look at the flow chart for the notification process. The consultation processes, such as the changes in working circumstances or perhaps restructure of a workplace, is where these processes definitely need legal advice, and it's not only on the information given to the employer, the actual consultation process, and just how that comes about. So if you feel that you have a potential claim that someone's not happy with what's about to happen, and people do get nervous when they're going to lose their jobs, or they potentially could. A lot of people don't like change in the workplace. They're quite happy the way things have been for a number of years, and suddenly someone comes in and changes things. So if there's a potential claim, notify the Connectional Office. That's me. I prefer to get an email, but you can call me and ask me for advice. I'm quite happy for that. And but if you send me an email, I like to know the circumstances and the people involved. There's only 3 people that are privy to the liability claim information that comes into the Connectional Office, and that is myself and Georgia, who's my work colleague. She's the Insurance and Property Administration and Assistant, and also Tara Tautari, the General Secretary. The thing is that if you let the Connectional know and there isn't a personal grievance, it hasn't cost you anything, the insurer's got the heads up right from the start. They're not in for any surprises, such as some criticisms levelled at the employer, and and they may have wanted to give out advice at this onset as well. And once a personal grievance is lodged, then there will be, the insurer will determine who that legal advice will, did I say that correctly? Once a personal grievance has been lodged, the insurer will determine who the legal advisor will be, and that will be different to the person that's given advice at the consultation onset, and through that process. And the reason for that is because we don't want a person that's given advice early on in the process, and they are investigating or themselves. The personal grievances, thank you, Trudy. So employment disputes liability insurance covers legal fees, settlements, legal opinion for personal grievances and employment disputes. And it may even be a person that arranges for all the parties to come together for a mediation meeting, and to move on as such, and to sort out the problem. Quite often, personal grievances do not lead to a settlement. More often than not, actually, we don't have that many of the claims coming to a settlement. for employment disputes, and that is because generally our employers within the church are really good at notifying the connectional office early on in the piece, and also know the process reasonably well. Yeah, so the insurer will nominate the legal advisor when it gets to the when a personal grievance has been lodged. Just quickly talk to you about the relevant insurance covers that we have for the Methodist Church. We have employment disputes liability, and that is to cover damage and costs arising from certain employment-related disputes, such as wrongful termination, harassment, discrimination, and it also includes the associated defence costs. There's employer's liability, which is claims that covers claims made by an employee against an employer for injury or illness occurring in the workplace where the cover falls outside the scope of the accident compensation legislation, and that includes associated defence costs as well. The professional indemnity insurance and or errors and omissions is to cover legal liability incurred by giving negligent advice through the breach of professional duty. Cover includes associated defence costs as well. Statutory liability is to cover fines or penalties imposed for unintentional breaches of certain statutes. The cover also includes, again, defence costs. The directors and officers liability, that's for board members or trustee members, but it's that is to cover directors, executives, employees against liability that might occur carrying out the duties as a company director on a board. The insurance can also reimburse the company where it's already indemnified its directors for any such liability, and the cover can include associated defence costs. Medical malpractice covers, and that's we have a number of caregivers within the church, especially within missions, and the medical care that they provide or medical support, and that covers claims for third parties arising from the allegation of a medical incident in the conduct of professional healthcare services, provided that arises from an act, error, or omission. And it may be that the caregiver just certainly didn't turn up. And that, again, covers the defence costs. Generally, our liability cover has an excess of $5,000, with the exception of employment disputes liability that attracts a $30,000 excess. Now I'm going to hand you over to Trudy, but we'll see if there's any questions first.
We do have a question. Thank you, Wendy. Julie asks, they've used 360 Consulting for employment matters, but does the church have a legal advisor that you'd recommend for employment matters, or someone who is knowledgeable about church processes that should be used if the occasion arises?
We have a number of people on our panel, legal advisors, employment legal advisors on our panel, and I think that 360 is up there, used. They are consulted often, and the outcome is always good. So I think that you're using 360. They are up to they know about the church process, the structure of the church, and how it works, and they've been doing this for a very, very long time. They've been associated with Methodist Church for a very long time too. If you wanted to see the panel, sorry, someone's going home. Want to see the list of our panel, and these are only the advisors that have been approved for the initial process. So that's the consultation process where you're making changes, where you have a disciplinary process, and there hasn't been a personal grievance lodged. I hope that answers your question. I think 360 are excellent.
Yeah. So if you're going through a restructure process, your current lawyers that you're comfortable with are okay to use, aren't they? It's only if a PG comes into actually occurs that the insurance company may request a different insurer to take a different legal advisor to take over.
They will always appoint someone else, and because the person that gave you legal advice in the interim, when you were going through the initial process, may have given you the wrong advice, and they can't investigate themselves or defend themselves. They need to be, or they can defend themselves, but they don't need to be asking the questions as well. So they need to be separated from that process once it becomes a personal grievance.
Right then. Thank you, Wendy. That's all the questions we have for the employment claims process.
I'll hand you over to Trudy.
Thank you so much. We come to talk about personal safety. Now, this is one of the areas that Wendy touched on with regards to if there's unchanged circumstances. So if somebody has an ongoing issue and we do nothing about it, it actually provides grounds for a personal grievance to be taken. So when it comes to personal safety, our job is to ensure that people have the means and the resources to do their job safely. As a worker, as the employee ourselves, it is our job to do the job safely, which means that we make the most of the resources that are available to do our job safely. When it comes to personal safety, there's many places in the church where people may be working alone or they're not working in an office, which means that the level of care that needs to be taken changes. You come to the office and you just do it day in and day out. You might get a bit complacent when you're in the office, but that's okay because it's a safe environment. It's when the environments that we're working in are not safe that we need to take additional care. So from that perspective, it really depends on what your job is. If you think about the isolated circumstances some people work in, or the non-standard hours that are worked, the sort of things that we undertake, our parish offices are normally manned by one person, two if we're lucky, and if you're really lucky there's a whole heap more. Ministry visits are undertaken outside of normal working hours, generally by a single person. Even the act of travelling, if you think about Auckland and travelling in Auckland, doing it for work purposes puts you in potentially a stressful situation. We all know how bad Auckland traffic is. Even undertaking building maintenance, our volunteers, if they're a little bit older and they've got to climb a ladder, the level of care they need to take about their personal safety becomes quite important. With some of our missions, and they undertake property inspections for the housing tenants that they look after, some of those situations can be quite unsafe. People can feel uncertain and unsafe in those areas. And as Wendy said, our caregivers, if they're going out to clients' houses, their personal homes, those are situations for personal care. So, we're looking at physical dangers, the activities that actually pose a risk, and people who might pose a risk around what do we consider when we think about our personal safety. And we also need to be aware, and this is quite important too, that it's not a juggling act about home and life and work balance, because we're human. We take what we feel or do at home, we take it to work, and what we feel and do at work, we take home as well. There's no true separation about the effects of what we do between our home life and our work life. So if you have a stressful day at work, you're going to take that home. If you have a big party on the weekend, you're going to take your fatigue into work. And all of those factors add up into the equation of what might be safe or unsafe when we get to work. So if we think about fatigue, it affects your judgment, it affects your reflexes. Distractions can cause accidents when you're driving. You know, if you're still on your phone to your mates after your parties on the weekend, even, as I said, travel and driving can set your tone for how your day proceeds. So we need to consider life in general when we think about personal safety. So when you start to plan your day out, you need to go, well, on my Mondays, I might need to do this rather than that to cope with what's happened over the weekend. Auckland, one of the great examples I had from some Auckland people was that after they have their drive to work and sorting out their parking, and the parking was just as stressful as the drive, they took the opportunity to have a quick download with somebody in the office, have a catch up and a cup of tea, and that just got rid of those stress levels to allow them to address their day. Again, from the same office, when they visit a tenancy for housing that they look after, it's a two-person job, that no one person gets put in a situation where they are potentially confronting one of the tenants and it makes it unsafe. So with two people there, it just allows for a greater degree of certainty about how they're going to manage their personal safety. So the sorts of things we need to be thinking about when we think and discuss personal safety, it's all in the planning. So these are examples of what we should be or could be thinking about in the different situations. So if you take your activity and you consider, I'm a lone parish administrator, what can I do to make things safe for myself, make me feel confident in my workplace? The parish council needs to work with them to think about where's the safety zone. So one parish I do know of created, the glass partition between the parish office and people walking in off the street because of an incident where one gentleman was potentially having difficulties that day and created a bit of a scene. So they created a safety zone with the glass barriers. They also had in place, and this was awesome, a camera. So a camera on the reception area works as a great witness. It turns out that the receptionist did an outstanding job. How she positioned herself, the body language which she presented to this person who came into the office was spot on. She did a great job. So not only does the camera record the event as a witness, being able to review it and go, what did I actually do? Did I do everything right? And it's my belief that it gave some relief to the parish administrator as well, because when you get into these scenarios, you're working under a certain stress level and it's not that easy to go, what did I actually do? Your brain starts churning instead of going, what did I actually do? And allowing people to analyse activities so that they can repeat the good and improve the not so good stuff. So again, some of the things that could happen when you're a lone worker, particularly parish admin, you may have an alarm button. It's got to go somewhere, and it's got to go somewhere where people will respond to the alarm. Telephones or mobile phones are not actually good tools to use in this situation. I don't know about you, but if you've got to open up your phone, like my phone, works off face recognition. It's not half obvious when you're on your phone if you have to lift it up to your face to get the phone to work. So when you're in a situation where you're trying to deal with somebody who has issues, who's not feeling 100% today, and you've got to blatantly lift your phone up to get it to operate, it's a dead giveaway what you're doing. So that can just add to the situation where it's not going to be as safe as you might otherwise think. Ministry visits, when our ministers, lay or ordained, go out to make their pastoral visits, if they're uncertain about the environment that they're going into, they should call somebody. just to let them know what's happening. I'm going to so-and-so's house. I will be an hour. I will call you when I'm finished. And it's quite important that it is a phone call, not a text, because anybody can send a text. You don't know who sent it. All you know is whose phone it was sent from. So with a phone call, you actually have more certainty that the person is okay after the visit. When you are visiting people's homes, you need to share the details. So whether you've got a diary on your office desk, or you phone somebody before you make your visits, you phone them again when you are finished with your visits, those sorts of things. It's just sharing the story of your actions as you go along. Also, and I'm not telling anybody anything new with this last one, consider wearing face masks, because some of what we need to consider now are illnesses. It's a whole different story now. COVID, it's different variations, potentially even the monkeypox, which is, a couple of cases in New Zealand already. We need to be certain that when we go out visiting, that we're taking all of the health precautions that we can with regards to infections. Again, I can't repeat this enough about the planning. It's all in the planning. So when you travel, if it's for distances, if it's during peak hour travel, consider when you're going to get a break, when you're going to have time to unwind from your journey, that you have a first aid kit in your car. If you're traveling for work, then your car becomes a workplace. Therefore, it should be set up to make sure that you're safe should something occur. Of course, you should have a current driver's license. Your vehicle should be registered and have a current warrant of fitness. All of those things to say that your tools are safe, your resources are available. You've done everything that you need to do to plan your work. Part of all of this too, and as part of our emergency response plan, is to practice, have a drill. If you've got an action plan around an activity, like if you're going to test the safety zone for the lone parish administrator, then have a drill, practice it. Have somebody walk in and pretend that they're not 100% today, and see whether the premises will suit a fit for purpose to keep the parish administrator safe, and that the parish administrator knows what to do when that tension gets wound up just a little bit more. Some of the other incidents that I've heard about in the church are people undertaking maintenance on the buildings by themselves, or not having a buddy when they go about their work, particularly climbing ladders. When you're working at height, you need to ensure you can get up the ladder safely, down the ladder safely, that the ladder's safe, you got the right ladder for the right job, that everything's inspected before you start. That includes the ground that you're going to put the ladder on. Is it secure? Is it flat? Is the ladder up to standard? Are the rubber feet still okay on the ladder? Is the ladder tied off so it won't slip? All of that sort of stuff. Once you've got that planning in place and underway, then the job becomes a whole lot easier, and you should be able to make it safe as well. If we go back to the person who came to visit our parish administrator, that person, I label them as people who pose a risk. If you're visiting somebody, or if they are on your premises, that really depends on the scenario with which you are with that person who poses a risk. Some of the things that we were told with the Christchurch home repair program, with the earthquake repairs, it was my job to go on site and talk to homeowners, and some of those homeowners were quite stressful. So as it was put to us, you keep your distance close enough you can have a reasonable conversation, far enough away that you're not going to get sucker punched, because people do get stressed. They'll react physically. So about 2 meters, keep yourself 2 meters away from somebody who poses a risk. If you have the opportunity to put a little something between you, whether it's a rubbish bin or a desk or a glass partition, excellent. Make sure there's a clear exit path. for you. If you're visiting somebody's home, you want clear access to the exit. If they've come into your office, the last thing you want to do is corner them. So you need to make sure they've got access out, allow them to get out. So long as you're safe and you have your own exit path and they've got their exit path, that's safe. You need to recognise the signs. Now, this may take time, it may take expertise. Are we dealing with somebody who's under a lot of stress? What does stress look like? And that may be very individual to the person. They may be on drugs or under the influence of alcohol. What does that look like? Can you smell the alcohol? Can you see their eyes are not quite normal? Do you take a buddy with you or make sure that one's on hand if you ever need them? Again, it's all situation dependent upon your parish office or your work office or the place with which you encounter the person who poses a risk. Lastly, thinking about the buildings that you might visit, one thing that was highlighted for me was to wear proper shoes. Being polite, I always used to take my shoes off when I would visit somebody's home. Unfortunately, one time, the elderly lady was living in a farmhouse and she allowed in all the goats and the sheep and the chickens and didn't let the dogs out, and the floor was wet and I got wet socks. So I always wear shoes if I visit a house under those circumstances, but you can get booties or socks for your shoes so that you can cover them up. So you're still not treading in the outside into somebody else's house. You treat the house with respect, but you keep your shoes on. Now, to me, it always sounds daft, but if you think about it, if you end up with somebody who does pose a risk and you don't have your shoes on because you left them at the front door, how are you going to run for it? One thing leads to another. Without the training of what to do in those circumstances, I could have been in difficulties myself a couple of times. And so, again, it comes down to the planning, that you get other people who do similar things to yourself and sit down and go, how do you guys deal with this issue? This is what I do. What do you do? Grab some ideas from everybody around you and really discuss and plan what you might do in the different scenarios that you encounter as you work. And that is really it. If you've got specific questions around concerns you've got around personal safety with the work that you do, then contact me and we'll discuss it and I'll provide some ideas. So this is just a general overview of things we should consider about our personal safety as we undertake our church activities. And that's us for the evening.
We don't seem to have any questions, Trudy. I was just going to say that our next topic, thank you all for attending this webinar, and the webinar has been recorded and all relevant information will be available with it on the Methodist Church New Zealand website shortly. You can direct, as Trudy has said, you can direct questions to either her or Trudy or myself. And also our next topic in September is planned around an actual insurance claim. So making an insurance claim, what you need to know, what you need to think about, and what you need to provide, the information you need to provide to us. Further details surrounding that will come shortly. And if you look in Touchstone, we usually advertise we do advertise prior to our webinars. Thank you for your time and interest in attending, and we look forward to seeing you next time.
Ka kite.
No.